Emma Chen stared at her reflection in the floor-length mirror of her Manhattan apartment, smoothing down the emerald silk dress that hugged her curves perfectly. At 29, she had worked tirelessly to reach her position as marketing director at Pinnacle Advertising, one of the most prestigious firms in New York City. Tonight's annual charity gala would determine whether she finally made partner or remained stuck in middle management forever. Her phone buzzed with another urgent message from her boss, Richard Hampton. Emma, remember tonight is crucial. Hartwell Foundation is considering a multi-million-dollar campaign contract. Impress them. She sighed deeply, knowing the unspoken expectation. Richard wanted her there with a charming companion, someone who would enhance her professional image. The problem was Emma's dating life had been non-existent for months. Her last relationship crumbled under the pressure of her demanding career, and she hadn't had time to build meaningful connections since then, a risky solution 3 days ago. In a moment of desperation, Emma had made a decision that still made her stomach flutter with anxiety. She contacted Elite Companions, a discreet agency that provided sophisticated escorts for high-profile events. The consultation had been professional and thorough. She specifically requested someone educated, well-spoken, and capable of discussing business and current events naturally. "We have the perfect gentleman for you," the agency coordinator, Mrs. Patterson, had assured her. "Michael Torres is experienced with corporate events and comes highly recommended." Now, checking her diamond watch, Emma realized Michael should arrive any minute. She had arranged to meet him at her apartment first, giving them time to discuss the evening's expectations and establish their story for curious attendees. The unexpected arrival, the doorbell chimed precisely at 7 o'clock. Emma took a deep breath, opened the door, and froze. The man standing in her hallway was nothing like she had imagined. Tall and commanding, with dark hair and piercing gray eyes, he wore his black tuxedo with an elegance that seemed completely natural. Something about his presence filled the space around him with quiet authority. "You must be Emma," he said, his voice smooth and confident. "I apologize for the last-minute change. Michael had a family emergency, so I'm stepping in tonight." "I'm David." Emma felt her carefully planned evening shift beneath her feet. "David, but I specifically requested Michael. I don't know anything about you." David stepped forward slightly, his smile warm but mysterious. "I understand your concern. Mrs. Patterson briefed me thoroughly about your needs for this evening. I promise you'll find me more than capable of fulfilling the role." There was something magnetic about his confidence that made Emma's protests fade. She found herself studying his face, noting the sharp jawline and the way his eyes seemed to hold secrets. Professional instincts told her to send him away, but practical necessity won out. The gala started in an hour, and she couldn't arrive alone. "Setting the stage, come in," she said finally, stepping aside. "We need to establish our story quickly." David entered her apartment, his gaze taking in the modern furnishings and carefully curated art pieces. "Impressive space. You have excellent taste." Emma felt an unexpected flush of pleasure at his approval.
"Thank you."
"Now, about tonight. We've been dating for 3 months. We met at a bookstore in Soho. You work in consulting, which explains why you travel frequently and aren't always available for company events." He nodded thoughtfully. "What kind of books were you buying when we met?" The question caught her off guard. Most people would simply memorize the basic facts, but David seemed interested in creating authentic details. "Business strategy books. I was researching expansion techniques for international markets. I was browsing the philosophy section," he added smoothly, "specifically looking for works by Marcus Aurelius." We struck up a conversation about the practical applications of Stoic philosophy in modern business. Emma stared at him in surprise. That level of detail suggested either exceptional professionalism or genuine intellectual curiosity. "You've read Marcus Aurelius?" "Meditations changed my perspective on leadership and decision-making," he replied, then smiled. "But we should probably save the philosophical discussions for the car. We don't want to be late." The journey begins in the elevator down to the lobby. Emma found herself stealing glances at David. He moved with the kind of confidence she associated with people accustomed to being in charge. When he placed his hand gently on the small of her back to guide her toward the waiting car. The touch sent an unexpected shiver through her. "Nervous?" he asked as they settled into the back seat of the black sedan. "Always, before big events," she admitted. "This gala could determine my entire career trajectory." David turned to face her fully. "Tell me about it. What makes this evening so crucial?" Emma found herself opening up about her ambitions, her struggles in a male-dominated industry, and the pressure she felt to prove herself constantly. David listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated he understood the complexities of corporate politics. "You know," he said as they neared the venue, "success often comes from being authentically yourself rather than trying to be what others expect. Easy to say when you're not fighting for recognition every day," Emma replied, though without bitterness. David's expression grew thoughtful. "Sometimes the fight changes us in ways we don't anticipate. The question is whether we like who we become in the process." Grand entrance, the Mandarin Oriental's ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and elegant floral arrangements. New York's elite mingled in their finest attire, the air buzzing with conversations about business deals, charitable causes, and social connections. Emma felt David's presence beside her like a shield against the judgmental stares and whispered speculations that usually followed her at these events. "Emma, darling." Richard Hampton approached with his wife, both of them eyeing David with obvious curiosity. "You look stunning tonight." "Thank you, Richard." "I'd like you to meet David," Emma said, her heart racing as she wondered how he would handle the introduction. David extended his hand with perfect composure. "Richard, pleasure to meet you. Emma speaks of you often. She's incredibly passionate about the Hartwell Foundation project." Richard's eyebrows rose slightly. "Oh, you're familiar with our work?" "Environmental sustainability marketing fascinates me," David replied smoothly. "The challenge of making conservation profitable requires innovative thinking." Emma watched in amazement as David engaged Richard in a sophisticated discussion about market trends and consumer behavior. He spoke with the kind of insight that typically came from years of high-level business experience, not from someone who worked as an escort. Deeper connections. As the evening progressed, Emma found herself genuinely enjoying David's company. He navigated social interactions effortlessly, remembering names and personal details with remarkable skill. When she introduced him to potential clients, he asked intelligent questions that actually advanced her business interests. During dinner, seated at a table with several foundation board members, David shared thoughtful perspectives on philanthropy and social responsibility that impressed everyone present. Emma caught herself staring at him, wondering who he really was beneath the polished exterior. "Your boyfriend is quite remarkable," whispered Catherine Hartwell, the foundation's president. "Such depth and intelligence. You're very lucky." Emma smiled and nodded, but inside she felt increasingly confused. David's knowledge and sophistication seemed far beyond what she'd expect from someone in his supposed profession. When he excused himself to take a phone call, she noticed him speaking with the kind of authority she associated with executives, not consultants. The dance. When the orchestra began playing, David extended his hand to Emma. "May I have this dance?" The dance floor held close in his arms. Emma felt a connection she hadn't experienced in years. David moved with natural grace, leading her through the steps with gentle confidence. The scent of his cologne, subtle and expensive, made her feel slightly dizzy. "You're full of surprises," she murmured, as they swayed to the music. "Good surprises, I hope," he replied, his breath warm against her ear. Emma looked up into his gray eyes and saw something that made her heart skip. The way he was looking at her didn't feel like a professional performance. There was genuine warmth there, perhaps even desire. "Very good surprises," she admitted softly. As the song ended, David's hand lingered on her waist. For a moment, they stood motionless in the middle of the dance floor, surrounded by other couples but feeling completely alone together. Seeds of doubt. The magical moment was interrupted by Emma's assistant, Jennifer, approaching with obvious excitement. "Emma, you'll never believe this. James Alexander from Technova Industries just arrived. He never comes to these events." Emma felt David stiffen beside her. She glanced at him curiously, but his expression had become carefully neutral. "Who's James Alexander?" David asked casually. One of the youngest billionaire CEOs in the city, Jennifer gushed. He's incredibly private, never gives interviews, barely appears in public.
Oh.
Some people call him the ghost of Silicon Valley. Emma noticed David's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Sounds like an interesting man, he said. David's eyes flashed with something she couldn't identify. Any man who doesn't notice you is a fool. The intensity in his voice made Emma's breath catch. She stared at him, feeling like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. Everything about David suggested wealth, power, sophistication that extended far beyond his supposed consulting career. A perfect evening's end as the gala wound down. Emma realized the evening had exceeded all her expectations. Several potential clients had expressed serious interest in working with her. Richard had hinted at partnership discussions, and she had spent the most enchanting evening she could remember in David's company. "Thank you," she said as they waited. "For their car? Tonight was perfect." David smiled, but she noticed it didn't quite reach his eyes. "The pleasure was entirely mine, Emma." During the ride back to her apartment, Emma found herself hoping this wouldn't be the last time she saw him. Professional arrangement or not, she felt a connection with David that she didn't want to lose. "Would you like to come up for coffee?" she asked as they pulled up to her building, her heart pounding with nervous anticipation. David looked at her. For a long moment, conflict playing across his features. "I'd like that very much," said finally. Emma woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom windows and the unfamiliar but pleasant scent of coffee brewing in her kitchen. For a moment, she lay still, remembering the previous night's events, with a mixture of wonder and confusion. David had stayed until nearly 3 in the morning, talking about everything from literature to business philosophy. But he had remained a perfect gentleman, despite the obvious chemistry between them. She found him in her kitchen, fully dressed in his tuxedo pants and white shirt, sleeves rolled up as he prepared breakfast. The domestic scene felt surprisingly natural, as if he belonged there. "Good morning," she said, wrapping her silk robe tighter around herself. David turned, offering her a cup of coffee with a smile that made her stomach flutter. "I hope you don't mind. I'm an early riser, and I thought you might need caffeine after." Last night, Emma accepted the coffee, noting that he had prepared it exactly how she liked it, despite never asking her preferences. Another small detail that added to her growing list of questions about this mysterious man: the phone call that changes everything. As they sat together at her breakfast bar, sharing croissants David had somehow procured from the French bakery down the street, his phone rang. Emma watched his expression change as he glanced at the screen, transforming from relaxed contentment to sharp alertness. "Excuse me," he said, stepping onto her balcony to take the call. Through the glass door, Emma could see him pacing, his body language suggesting he was giving instructions rather than receiving them. His voice, though muffled, carried the tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. When he returned, his demeanor had shifted subtly. The warmth was still there, but now it was layered with something else. Distraction, perhaps. Even anxiety. "Work emergency?" Emma asked, recognizing the signs from her own demanding career. "Something like that," David replied, but his smile seemed forced. "I may need to cut our morning short." Emma felt a stab of disappointment. She had been hoping they could spend the day together, exploring whatever was developing between them. "Of course, I understand how demanding consulting can be." David paused, coffee cup halfway to his lips. "Emma, about my work." His phone rang again, and the moment was lost. This time Emma could hear fragments of the conversation: merger talks, board meeting, and stock price. None of it sounded like typical consulting discussions. Pieces of a puzzle after David left with promises to call her later. Emma found herself unable to concentrate on anything else. She tried working on campaign presentations, going for her usual run in Central Park, even reorganizing her closet, but her thoughts kept returning to the man who had swept into her life so unexpectedly. His sophistication wasn't learned or performed, it was innate. The way he had handled himself at the gala, his knowledge of business and philosophy, even his comfort in her upscale neighborhood, all suggested someone far removed from the escort services industry. Emma's journalistic instincts honed during Her college years studying communications finally kicked in. She opened her laptop and began researching, starting with elite companions. The agency's website was elegant but vague, offering little concrete information about their staff or selection process. Next, she searched for David in connection with consulting firms in New York. Nothing. She tried variations of his name, different spellings, even image searches, but came up empty dash-handed. The coincidence that wasn't that afternoon. While reviewing notes from the previous night's networking conversations, Emma came across Catherine Hartwell's business card. On impulse, she decided to call and thank her for the lovely evening, hoping to solidify the connection for future business opportunities. "Emma, dear, I'm so glad you called." Catherine's warm voice came through the phone. "I wanted to tell you again how impressed everyone was with you and your young man." "Thank you, Mrs. Hartwell. David certainly made a wonderful impression." "Indeed he did. My husband swore he recognized him from somewhere. He spent half the drive home trying to place the face." Emma's heart began to race. Really? David has a very distinctive look. Charles finally remembered where he'd seen him. It was in Forbes magazine of all places. There was an article about young entrepreneurs, and your David bore a striking resemblance to one of them. Of course, it couldn't be the same person. That young man was some sort of tech mogul worth billions. The phone nearly slipped from Emma's suddenly sweaty palm. Tech mogul. James Alexander, I think the name was, CEO of Technova Industries. Quite the coincidence that they look so similar, don't you think? The investigation deepens after ending. The call with shaking hands, Emma immediately searched for James Alexander online. The first image that appeared made her sink into her chair in shock. The man smiling back at her from the computer screen was unmistakably David. Despite the formal business attire and serious expression, she read every article she could find, piecing together the story of a brilliant entrepreneur who'd built a technology empire from nothing after his father's death when he was just 25. The articles described him as intensely private, rarely appearing in public, and never known to attend social events. Emma's mind reeled as she processed the implications. James Alexander David was worth over $3 billion. He owned properties around the world, employed thousands of people, could buy her entire apartment building without thinking twice about the expense. But none of that explained what he was doing, pretending to be an escort for her. Company's charity gala, the meeting her. Phone buzzed with a text message from David. "Can we meet? I have something important to tell you." Emma stared at the message for several minutes before responding. "My apartment. 1 hour." She spent that hour alternating between pacing and sitting, between anger and confusion. Had this been some sort of elaborate joke? A wealthy man's entertainment at her expense? The thought made her feel sick with humiliation. When David arrived, he looked different somehow. Easy confidence was still there, but now it was tempered with obvious nervousness. He had changed into casual clothes, expensive casual clothes. Emma now realized, noting designer labels she hadn't paid attention to before. "Emma, we need to talk," he said, his gray eyes serious. "Yes, we do, James." He stopped short, his face going pale, you know. The truth unveiled. "I know you're James Alexander, CEO of Technova Industries. What I don't know is why one of the richest men in America was pretending to be my escort last night." James ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture that would have seemed endearing under different circumstances. "It's complicated. Try me," Emma said, crossing her arms and trying to ignore how her heart was still racing just from being near him. James sat heavily on her sofa, looking suddenly exhausted. "I wasn't supposed to be there at all. I had a dinner meeting at the Mandarin Oriental with potential investors. When it ended early, I decided to walk through the hotel rather than dealing with photographers outside." Emma frowned. "Photographers. There's usually a few lurking around hotels where I have meetings. I try to avoid them when possible." He looked up at her with something like pleading in his eyes. "When you approached me, assuming I was your escort, I should have corrected you immediately, but you didn't." "No, I didn't." James stood and began pacing, just as Emma had been doing earlier. "Do you know what it's like to have people change completely the moment they learn your name? To never know if someone likes you or likes your bank account. Emma felt her anger beginning to waver. So you decided to lie to me instead. I decided to see what it would be like to be ordinary for one evening, to be judged on my conversation and character rather than my net worth. He stopped, pacing, and looked directly at her. And I found out it was the most genuine evening I'd experienced in years. Despite her anger, Emma could hear the sincerity in his voice. She remembered how natural their conversation had felt, how comfortable she had been in his presence before learning his identity. You could have told me afterwards, she said, though. Her tone had softened slightly. I came close several times. James moved closer to her, his expression earnest. But I was afraid of losing what we had found together. Afraid you'd start seeing dollar signs instead of just seeing me. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. You think so little of me that you believe I'd be interested in you only for money? No, James said quickly. Emma, that's not what I meant. It's just that it's happened so many times before. Women who seemed genuine until they learned who I was, then suddenly became fascinated by my lifestyle rather than my personality. She could see the pain in his eyes, the wariness that came from repeated disappointment. Despite her hurt and confusion, she felt a stab of sympathy for this man who had everything money could buy, but struggled to find authentic human connection. So what happens now? Emma asked quietly. The proposal. James stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his familiar cologne. Now I'm hoping you'll give me a chance to prove that everything between us last night was real, that the connection we felt had nothing to do with money or status and everything to do with who we are as people. Emma studied his face, seeing vulnerability beneath the polished exterior. You lied to me, James. How am I supposed to trust you now? 'Cause I'm telling you the truth now, when I have everything to lose by doing so. He reached out tentatively, as if asking permission before taking her hand. I'm taking the biggest risk of my life by being honest with you. Emma felt the warmth of his touch and the familiar flutter in her stomach that his presence always seemed to cause. What kind of risk? The risk that you'll walk away. It's that I'll lose the first woman I've met in years who saw me as just a man worth knowing. His thumb traced gently across her knuckles. Emma, I'm falling in love with you. Not with what you can do for me or how you make me look to others, but with your intelligence, your ambition, your kindness. Emma's heart skipped at his words, but she forced herself to think clearly. This is all happening so fast. 24 hours ago, I didn't even know your real name. I know it's overwhelming. I know I have no right to ask anything of you after. Lying. James lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm. But I'm asking anyway. Have dinner with me tomorrow night? Let me show you who I really am. Emma looked into his gray eyes and saw hope mixed with fear. Everything logical told her to send him away, to protect herself from the complications that would come with getting involved with someone like James Alexander. But her heart was already invested in this man, regardless of his net worth. One dinner, she said finally. But no more lies, no more games. If we're going to do this, it has to be honest from now on. The relief in James's smile was radiant. No more lies, he promised. Just us, figuring out if what we started last night can survive in the real world. The next evening, Emma stood before her closet for the third time in an hour, unable to decide what to wear for her dinner with James. Everything seemed wrong. Too formal made it feel like a business meeting. Too casual seemed inappropriate for dining with a billionaire. Too dressy looked like she was trying too hard to impress him. Finally, she settled on a simple black dress that made her feel confident without being overdone. As she applied her makeup, Emma caught herself wondering if this was how James felt all the time, constantly questioning whether people's reactions to him were genuine or performed. At exactly 7 o'clock, her doorman called to announce James's arrival. When she stepped out of the elevator, she found him waiting by a modest black car. Not the flashy sports car or limousine she might have expected. You look beautiful, he said, opening the passenger door for her with the same gentlemanly grace he had shown as David. Emma settled into the comfortable leather seat, noting the car's luxurious interior, despite its understated exterior.
Where?
Are we going? James smiled as he started the engine. Somewhere we can talk without interruption or curious stares. A world apart, 20 minutes later, they pulled up to a small Italian restaurant in Brooklyn that Emma had never heard of despite her years in New York. The exterior was unassuming, with simple wooden doors and soft lighting glowing through curtained windows. "This doesn't look like where billionaires usually eat," Emma commented as James helped her from the car. "That's exactly why I love it," he replied. "Giuseppe and Maria have owned this place for 30 years. They treat everyone like family, regardless of their bank account." Inside, the restaurant was cozy and warm, filled with the scents of garlic and fresh herbs. An elderly Italian man approached them with genuine delight spreading across his weathered face. "You bring us another beautiful lady to meet," Giuseppe said, embracing James warmly before turning to Emma with twinkling eyes. "Giuseppe, this is Emma. Emma, this is Giuseppe, who makes the best osso buco in all of New York." Emma watched in fascination as James interacted with Giuseppe and his wife Maria, who emerged from the kitchen to fuss over him like a beloved nephew. Their affection was clearly genuine, built over years of regular visits and shared conversations. This was James without the armor of wealth and status, just a man enjoying simple, human connection. Honest conversations over dinner, Emma learned pieces of James's story that had never appeared in any magazine article. He told her about the loneliness of inheriting his father's company at 25, the isolation that came with enormous responsibility, and the difficulty of forming relationships when everyone wanted something from him. "I spent years surrounded by people who agreed with everything I said because disagreeing might cost them their jobs or their business deals," James said, twirling pasta around his fork. "You have no idea how refreshing it was to meet someone who challenged my opinions and made me laugh without any agenda." Emma sipped her wine, considering his words. "But you still lied to me. Even after you saw how well we connected, you maintained the deception." James set down his fork, his expression serious. "You're right. I was a coward. I was so afraid of losing what we had that I convinced myself the lie was protecting both of us." "From what?" "From the complications that come with my real life. The media attention, the social pressures, the way money changes every relationship." He reached across the table to cover her hand with his. "But I've realized that hiding who I am was just another way of isolating myself." Emma felt the sincerity in his touch and saw the vulnerability he was showing her. "Tell me about your real life, parts the magazines don't cover." The truth behind the fortune. James spoke about his father, a brilliant inventor who had created the technology that became the foundation of Technova Industries. He described the overwhelming grief and responsibility he had felt when his father died suddenly, leaving him to manage a company he barely understood at the time. "I was 25. And terrified," James admitted. "I had an MBA, but that didn't prepare me for running a multi-billion-dollar corporation. I made mistakes, trusted the wrong people, nearly lost everything twice in the first year." Emma listened, captivated by this glimpse into a world she had never imagined. "What kept you going?" "Stubbornness, mostly, and the knowledge that thousands of people depended on the company for their livelihoods." James's smile was rueful. "I threw myself into work completely. 18-hour days, 7 days a week, for years." "When was the last time you took a real vacation?" I asked. James considered the question seriously. "I honestly can't remember. Every trip is tied to business somehow. Every social event is about networking or maintaining relationships that benefit the company." Emma felt a pang of recognition. "That sounds familiar. I do the same thing with my career. The difference is you chose your path. Mine was chosen." "For me," James paused, then added quietly, "until I met you. For the first time in years, I found myself wanting something that had nothing to do with business." The reality checks. The evening progressed. Emma felt herself falling deeper under James's spell. He was funny, intelligent, and genuinely interested in her thoughts and opinions. But nagging doubts kept intruding into their conversation. She said during dessert, "What happens after tonight?" Do we pretend that the difference in our circumstances doesn't matter? His expression grew thoughtful. What circumstances are you referring to? Don't be obtuse. You're worth billions. Live paycheck to paycheck in a one-bedroom apartment. You travel in private jets. I take the subway. We live in completely different worlds. James leaned forward, his gray eyes intense.
Money is just numbers on a balance sheet, Emma. It doesn't change who I am as a person, doesn't it?
Emma challenged. When was the last time you worried about paying rent or buying groceries? When did you last take public transportation or wait in line at a regular restaurant? She could see her words hitting home as James realized how completely his wealth had insulated him from ordinary experiences. You're right, he said finally. I've been removed from that kind of life for so long that I've forgotten what it's like. As they left the restaurant, walking slowly toward James's car while continuing their intense conversation, Emma noticed a man with a camera emerging from the shadows across the street. He began snapping photos immediately, the bright flash cutting through the evening darkness. James Alexander, is this your mystery girlfriend? The photographer called out, continuing to shoot as he approached them. Emma felt James tense beside her, his hand gripping hers more tightly. She could see the practiced mask sliding over his features, the same polished composure she remembered from their first meeting. No comment, James said firmly, quickening their pace toward the car, but the photographer was persistent, following them while calling out increasingly intrusive questions. Miss, what's your name? How long have you been dating James? Are you moving in together? Emma felt panic rising in her chest. This was exactly what she had feared. The loss of privacy, the invasion of her personal life. By tomorrow, her photo would probably be in gossip columns and online tabloids, her entire life dissected by strangers. Get in the car, James said, tersely, practically pushing her into the passenger seat before hurrying around to the driver's side. The aftermath as James drove away from the restaurant, Emma sat in stunned silence, processing what had just happened. The romantic evening had been shattered by the harsh reality of James's public life. I'm sorry, James said quietly. I should have anticipated this might happen. Does this happen often? Emma asked, her voice small. More than I'd like. Usually. I'm more careful about public appearances, but I wanted tonight to feel normal. He glanced at her with concern. Are you okay? Emma considered the question. Was she okay? The photographer's aggressive pursuit had been frightening, and the thought of her private life becoming public fodder made her feel sick. But looking at James's profile as he drove, seeing the tension in his shoulders and the worry in his eyes, she realized he was probably more upset about this than she was. I'm okay, she said, meaning it. But I'm beginning to understand what you meant about complications. The choice when they reached Emma's apartment building, James walked her to the entrance, but didn't ask to come up. Instead, he stood facing her under the soft glow of the lobby lights, his expression serious. Emma, I need you to understand something. If you decide to continue seeing me, this kind of attention will happen again. I can try to protect your privacy, but I can't eliminate the scrutiny entirely. Emma nodded, appreciating his honesty. And if I decide this is too much, pain flickered across James's features, then I'll respect your decision and disappear from your life. You'll never be bothered by photographers or reporters because of me again. Emma studied his face, seeing the man behind the billionaire facade. Despite the evening's dramatic ending, she had felt more alive and engaged than she had in years. James challenged her intellectually, made her laugh, and looked at her with an intensity that made her feel truly seen. I need time to think, she said finally. James nodded, though she could see the disappointment in his eyes. Of course, take all the time you need. He leaned down and kissed her forehead gently, a gesture so tender it made her heart ache. Whatever you decide, Emma, I want you to know that meeting you has changed me. You've reminded me that there's more to life than board meetings and profit margins. The decision alone in her apartment, Emma sat by her window looking out at the city lights, replaying the evening in her mind. The connection she felt with James was undeniable, but the complications were real and daunting. Dating a billionaire would mean living under constant scrutiny, dealing with people who might befriend her only to get closer to him. and navigating social situations far outside her comfort zone. But it would also mean being with a man who made her feel more alive and challenged than anyone ever had. Someone who saw her ambitions as admirable rather than threatening, who valued her intelligence and independence. Emma's phone buzzed with a text message from her assistant Jennifer. Emma, there are already photos online of you with some guy. Call me. So it had begun already. Emma opened her laptop and found several gossip websites featuring photos of her and James leaving the restaurant, along with wild speculation about their relationship. The headlines ranged from Billionaire's secret romance to tech mogul's mystery woman. Reading the articles filled Emma with a mixture of anxiety and determination. If she was going to be with James, she would need to be strong enough to handle this kind of attention. She would need to maintain her own identity and career while supporting him in his complex public life. Her phone rang, breaking her concentration. James's name appeared on the screen. I saw the articles, he said, without preamble when she answered. Emma, I'm so sorry. I can have my legal team contact the websites, try to get the photos removed. Don't, Emma said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. If we're going to do this, I need to face it head on, not hide behind lawyers and publicists.
There
was silence on the other end of the line. Finally, James spoke, his voice filled with something that sounded like admiration. You're remarkable, you know that? Emma smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. I'm terrified, actually. But I'm also tired of letting fear make my decisions for me. Does this mean? It means I'd like to see you again? We do this on equal terms, James? I won't. Be your kept woman, or your arm candy. I have my own career, my own ambitions, and my own identity. I wouldn't want you any other way, James said. And Emma could hear the smile in his voice. 3 months later, Emma adjusted the microphone clipped to her blazer as she waited in the wings of the conference center stage. Today marked the launch of the Hartwell Foundation's most ambitious campaign yet. She was about to present their marketing strategy to an audience of philanthropists, business leaders, and media representatives. In the months since that first evening at the charity gala, her life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. The relationship with James had brought challenges, paparazzi outside her apartment, speculation about their future together, and the constant navigation of social situations where she felt out of place. But it had also brought unexpected opportunities. James had introduced her to a network of influential people who valued her expertise and innovative thinking. Her client base had expanded dramatically, and she was seriously considering starting her own agency. More importantly, she had discovered a confidence in herself that she hadn't known existed. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Emma Chen, Creative Director of the Environmental Future Campaign. Emma walked onto the stage, her heart racing with excitement rather than nervousness. In the audience, she spotted James sitting in the third row, his face beaming with pride. Beside him sat Richard Hampton, who had finally offered her the partnership she had worked so hard to achieve. The presentation 6 months ago, the Hartwell Foundation challenged us to create a campaign that would fundamentally change how people think about environmental responsibility, Emma began, her voice clear and confident. Today, I'm here to show you how we can make sustainability not just a moral imperative, but an irresistible lifestyle choice. As she clicked through her presentation slides, Emma felt the audience's engagement building. The campaign strategy she had developed was innovative and comprehensive, combining traditional marketing techniques with cutting-edge social media strategies and influencer partnerships. The key insight driving this campaign is that people don't want to feel guilty about their choices. They want to feel proud of them, Emma explained, gesturing to a slide showing beautifully designed advertisements. Our approach makes environmental consciousness aspirational rather than obligatory. When she finished her presentation, the applause was thunderous. Catherine Hartwell approached the podium with tears in her eyes. Damn. In 30 years of foundation work, I have rarely seen such brilliant, innovative thinking, Catherine said into the microphone. Emma Chen has created something truly extraordinary here. Later that evening, at a small celebration dinner James had arranged at Giuseppe and Maria's restaurant, Emma found herself surrounded by people who had become genuinely important to her. Rachel had driven down from Seattle to attend the presentation. Richard and his wife were there to celebrate her success. And even Giuseppe and Maria had closed the restaurant early to host the private party. "I have something I want to say," James announced, standing and tapping his wine glass with a fork. 6 months ago, I met a woman who challenged every assumption I had about relationships, success, and what it means to find someone who truly sees you. Emma felt her cheeks flush as all eyes turned to her. She and James had talked about their future together, but always in private, never in such a public setting. "Emma, you've shown me that love isn't about finding someone who fits into your existing life. It's about building a new life together that neither of you could have imagined alone." James reached into his jacket pocket, and Emma's heart stopped. She hadn't expected this. Not tonight. Not like this. "I know we've only known each other for 6 months," James continued, his voice slightly shaky with nerves. "But I also know that I've learned more about myself, about happiness, and about what I want from life in these 6 months than I did in the previous 6 years. He dropped to one knee beside her chair, pulling out a simple but elegant ring. "Emma Chen, will you marry me?" The answer, Emma stared at the ring, then at James's hopeful face, then at the circle of people watching them with anticipation. Mind raced through all the reasons this was crazy. They had known each other for such a short time. Their lives were so different. The media attention would be intense. But then she thought about the man who had supported her career ambitions, without trying to overshadow them, who had learned to appreciate simple pleasures like subway rides and corner coffee shops, who looked at her every day like she was the most fascinating person he had ever met. "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Then louder, with more conviction, "Yes, I'll marry you." The restaurant erupted in cheers and applause. James slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then stood to kiss her as their friends and chosen family celebrated around them. The real beginning 6 months later. Emma stood in the bridal suite of a small chapel in Tuscany, adjusting her simple but elegant wedding dress. She had insisted on a small ceremony with only their closest friends and family in attendance. No paparazzi, no society photographers, no publicity. Rachel helped her with the final touches to her hair, while Maria, whom Emma had grown to love like a grandmother, fussed over the flowers. "Are you nervous?" Rachel asked, stepping back to admire her handiwork. Emma considered the question. She was about to marry a man who lived in a world completely different from the one she had grown up in. Their life together would involve challenges she was still learning to navigate. But she was also about to marry her best friend, her intellectual equal, and the person who made her feel most like herself. "Not nervous," Emma said finally. "Excited." Through the window, she could see James waiting at the altar in the garden. Below, looking handsome in his simple gray suit, Giuseppe was serving as his best man, and Catherine Hartwell sat in the front row next to Emma's parents, who had flown in from California. As Emma walked down the aisle toward the man who had literally stumbled into her life by accident, she reflected on how unexpected love could be. She had ordered an escort for one night to maintain her professional image, and instead found a partner who challenged her to be braver, kinder, and more authentic than she had ever been. James's face lit up when he saw her approaching, and Emma knew that whatever complications their future held, they would face them together. The mask had fallen away completely, and what remained was real, honest, and worth every risk they had taken to find it. Their story had begun with deception, but it was being written now in truth, courage, and the kind of love that transforms ordinary moments into extraordinary memories as they exchanged vows in the Tuscan sunshine. Surrounded by the people who mattered most to them, Emma smiled at the thought that sometimes the best things in life come when you least expect them, from the most unlikely places, and in the most surprising ways. The billionaire CEO and the ambitious marketing director had found something more valuable than all the money in the world. They had found each other. The end.